Hi class, we're going to review Chapter 8, Managing Power and Conflict. Power is an important aspect of nursing, healthcare, parenting, supervising. In terms of how we handle power and manage conflict, we need to look at both verbal and nonverbal. Nonverbal power language shows high power poses, low power poses. As you see in this picture, Obama takes up space while Biden hunkers down in the chair. In this one, Frank Underwood shows you how it's done. In this one, we've got the arms folded. That's a weak position. If shoulders are rolled forward, your arms are in front of you, you're sending a message that you're scared or not in control. If you roll back your shoulders and hold your head high, the crossed arms may signal confidence. But in nursing, this position can also be taken as you don't care, you're not sure, you're also maybe listening, maybe not listening. And finally, while this seems like a very relaxed position with your feet up on the desk, those arms out can be very offensive if it's a man talking to a woman. Power's defining characteristics. Power can be ethical or unethical. It does influence our conflicts and how we handle them. Power distance is a degree to which people view the unequal distribution of power as acceptable. High power distance cultures and low power distance cultures. In high power distance cultures, it's considered normal and even desirable for people of different social, professional status to be widely separated in terms of their power. Within such cultures, people give privileged treatment and extreme respect to those in high status positions. People in lesser status are expected to behave humbly. In low power distance cultures, people in high status positions strive to minimize the differences between themselves and low status people, often interacting with lower status persons in an informal and equal fashion. In our own culture, it varies. You can see Donald Trump in a high power status, whereas people are supposed to be humble, but he's striving to be much more friendly to people and even it out. Probably the most important thing in this chapter is how you handle conflict. How do you approach it will affect the outcomes. One of the ways is avoidance. You're ignoring the conflict, pretending it isn't happening, or communicating indirectly. One of the approaches to handling it is avoidance, ignoring the conflict, pretending it isn't happening, or communicating indirectly. For example, skirting or sniping, changing the subject, making a joke about it. You can leave the scene, just walk away. Avoidance is probably the most common use of how to handle a conflict. This can lead to cumulative annoyance, where you end up getting annoyed, more annoyed, more annoyed, and then you end up blowing up. Another result of avoidance is a pseudo-conflict, where, for example, your perception is one that a conflict exists, when in fact it really doesn't. In other words, you may think your boss really hates you when your boss doesn't at all. Your boss is just having other personal problems and it appears that they're taking it out on you. Sometimes avoidance can be a good way to handle conflict, especially if you get very emotional or it's a very emotional situation. In those terms, it probably is better to walk away. Another approach to handling conflict is accommodation. You abandon your own goals and acquiesce to the desire of another. This can work, and it may work for a while, but eventually your own desires are going to come out. Another way of handling conflict is competition. It's a pursuit of your own goal without regard for other goals. It's a very narcissistic approach. It can trigger defensive communication in others, and it can lead to escalation. Reactivity is another approach to handling conflict. And it usually is emotionally explosive and comes out in a negative fashion. A patient turns to you and reacts very negatively and emotionally because they perceive that you've insulted them. Collaboration is probably the best way to handle conflict. It's a mutual problem-solving challenge. Often results in a compromise, often results in more explanations of what the situation is. On page 258 at the bottom, they talk about Wilmot and Hocker 4 suggestions to handling conflict. The first one, and you should know these, the first one is attack problems, not people. The second is to focus on common interests and long-term goals. The third is to create options before arriving at decisions. Be flexible. And finally, the fourth is critically evaluate your solution. Ask for an assessment. Is this equally fair for both of us? The critical issue is livability. Can everyone live with the resolution in the long run? Or is it unfair or short of original desires that resentments are likely to emerge? If anyone answers yes to this latter question, go back and create options. I'm sure you've already taken the self-quiz, How Do You Approach Conflict? Go through this and then go back and look at what Wilmot and Hocker said and those 4 major points. Don't attack people, attack the problem, focus on common interests and long-term goals, create options before arriving at decisions, and critically evaluate your solution. See if you can change some of your habits to accommodate this. Do handle conflict. Collaborate. Constructive. Attack problem, not people. Focus on the common interests and long-term goals. Remember, in a collective society, people prefer that third person, especially like it broke instead of John broke it. Try to use some of that language. Maybe, possibly. Let go of the situation if the other person does not recognize that the conflict exists or does not want to deal with it. Just let it go. Remember, collaborate, collaborate, collaborate. In a short-term conflict, separation sometimes is needed. If you and your boss or you and another person in your family get into a conflict, sometimes separation is the best. Just kind of go your own way for a while and cool off. Count to 10. Domination. If you try to really win over someone else, it usually ends up in a win-lose solution. The strongest wins. The other person feels badly. Compromise. Yes, talk it over. Integrative agreements. Develop a creative solution together. That's a win-win solution. Collaborate. Structural improvements. Change the balance. Set some guidelines. If your boss is over-domineering, maybe you should talk to them and say, listen, I am a person. Maybe we could talk this out. But whenever you are just completely yelling at me, I can't do anything. Some of the major challenges to handling conflict is your own mind, your own self. You're thinking in your head, this person hates me, I can't do anything right, or this person is yelling at me, they're always angry, you can't talk to them. Then there's the use of the destructive message, the big F you, or go to hell, or whatever. You're turning around and destroying any chance of collaborating. You have serial arguments. You're building up this big blowout where you're finally going to yell at the person, scream at them, say destructive messages, and blow everything out of proportion. Don't want to do that. Physical violence, hopefully never. Finally, I added this last one. Some conflicts are totally unresolvable. If he doesn't love you, he doesn't love you. There's nothing you can do about it. If you don't love him and you never will, accept it. Finally, managing conflict and power does not need to be destructive. Review this chapter, view those videos that I suggest that you watch, because we'll be using one of them in your final exam.